interesting, the past is no guide to the future. The EU legislation is not necessarily a guide to the future. Trump is not necessarily a guide to the future. With that in mind, what surprises do you think we might see in Australia?
Well, I think the whole productivity debate is like a pause point where the government pauses and says, we're under a lot of pressure to bring in AI regulation. We're under a lot of pressure to bring in more detailed and prescriptive privacy regulation. Let's just stand back and think carefully about what we do next, in the knowledge that the EU and the US is not going to give us a guide. And I think that the most important person in this debate now is Jim Chalmers. And interestingly, Jim Chalmers wrote an opinion piece in the Guardian the other day, which basically says, hey, hang on, I know we're under a lot of pressure to bring in AI regulation, but we need to think really carefully about AI regulation getting in the way of innovation. So I do think this is an interesting opportunity for this industry to up the level of engagement with the government around what safe and responsible digital advertising looks like, what the best interests of consumers look like, and how to ensure the best alignment between the two, and the potential within that for the use of data clean rooms, de-identification, other privacy-enhancing technologies to guard against adverse outcomes for consumers. So I think it's a really interesting inflection point.
Mm. Thanks, Peter. Now, turning to the rest of the panel, we've heard Peter's thoughts. We all know in this room that digital advertising makes up 66% of all advertising. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on what concerns you about the way privacy reforms might target pixel tracking and could affect digital advertising and the free services and content that it supports. Who should we start with? Danny?
Yeah, I think it's a big question, and I think there's probably different things to what concerns me versus what concerns the general population. And I think generally people are concerned around a lack of visibility, and from a lack of visibility leading to a lack of value. As you touched on, a lot of these services on the internet are provided for free, and they're provided for free because we can advertise through these services. We can use that data to inform tracking and personalisation, a whole lot of things. And I think people are very concerned that over-regulating this domain will constrain that and lead to kind of like adverse impacts to individuals in terms of they might have to pay for services. I don't think personally I share the same fear as such. I actually think that's just a natural progression through the ecosystem where people will find other ways at trying to create value. And really the intention of creating these services is that they do have inherent value to an individual. It's like the example you raised, Peter, around the different price kind of mechanisms for individuals, for airlines. Like fundamentally, if organisations do that and a user doesn't find value in the price that they're served and they don't buy it, then they'll eventually have to change those prices anyway, right? So I think there's going to be more of an onus on different brands and organisations in different online services to have to think through value. And I also think that the more we get concerned around what regulation's going to do, the more I think we're looking in the wrong direction. I think the direction is more around what do individuals want, what do individuals value, and how do we make sure we provide them with the right services and kind of set up through the open internet to make sure that they receive value, but also that they feel safe and they've got all the other things that they're concerned about as well.
I think that's a really interesting point, actually, Danny, about that we shouldn't be following regulation. And I have to say, I am probably an optimist, but I think one point I've observed about this whole debate, the whole privacy debate, is that actually, really, most players are wanting the same thing. whether you're a regulator, whether you're a consumer, whether you are involved at whatever point in the world of digital advertising, whether you're an advertiser, that actually people want this to be effective. They want advertising to be appropriate for the user, and they want it to be measurable. And I think, you know, to be positive about a very complex situation, it's actually very good to be starting in a point where people probably, by and large, have reasonably consistent goals. On that, Peter, I might just, Nick, I'm curious to hear your view on how reasonable you think the OAIC's recent guidance on pixel tracking is. Now, do we want Peter to give a very quick summary of what that guidance is, or?
So the the Privacy Commissioner, when she closed the investigation into TikTok and use of TikTok pixels, was very critical of the existing law not giving the Privacy Commissioner remedies against TikTok, but emphasised that the third-party websites, media publishers, operators of websites that allowed pixels to be deployed, including the TikTok pixel, onto their websites had responsibilities to ensure that any collection and use of information through the use of those pixels was a permitted use under the Privacy Act, which would require notice as to the collection and use of personal information. And the fact that the operator of the website might not be directly collecting and using that information themselves didn't get them off the hook, because they had responsibilities as to the management of how their sites were collecting and using, enabling others to collect and use information. So it was really a shot across the bow of operators of websites that permitted third-party pixels to be deployed and used on those websites to say, hey, you can't just say, we didn't do it, it was done without our knowledge or consent or our active connivance or not to our direct benefit. That's not a complete defence.
Thanks, Peter. So, Nick, how practical is that?
Hopefully we'll get a bit more clarity on what fair and reasonable is in 1.5 or 1.75 or 2.1. But for now, it's fair to say it's pretty vague. And if there's a host of folks, brands, vendors, agencies, publishers in the room who are professing that they know part of it, not all of the solution. You can picture out there is an SME who's cracked open their laptop and they've jumped into their WordPress and they have their own ads manager. One of their mates' grandkids looks after the tag manager for them. What is it fair and reasonable for that person to understand the ramification of location in as explicit or implicit consent? I don't think so. I don't even think they know that. No offence, IAB. They probably don't know that this is happening today, right? This is not a world that they operate in. I remember, you go back 10 years. If you wanted to connect your CRM with an ad platform, you had to get these keys set up on either side of the platform, and then your data streams and which way the data flows, and things would break. Jump into HubSpot now, and it's a checkbox, and you log into your Meta platform or into your DSP, and they're connected. So I think in terms of the fair and reasonable test, that person should be the metric. And if it can't be, all of a sudden they're under scrutiny, they're being leveled quite large fines, there needs to be some level of guardrail and guidance that guides that person. On the sort of the vice versa, and I think this has kind of been touched on, we missed a step in this industry when we started accepting data as the trade for services. You know, how many folks use Google Maps in their car? I'm going to show of hands. And if you're old enough like me, who used to have a Garmin subscription, right? In terms of fair use, should Google be turning around and say, well, it's a $200 service, but give us a little bit of your information and it's free? Same with news aggregators, with social, with video, with blogs. It'd be interesting to see what comes about from this different potential tact that was announced at 10:30 last night. Because without that, I can see a world where a Westpac boss walks into the boardroom and says, I don't know, 10% short in profit is forecast. We can't sell people's data to e-coms anymore. And they're not going to go, no worries, cool, thanks for letting me know. They're going to say, well, where do I make up that shortfall? And that would be consumers. So I don't want to I'm not saying I'm conceited enough to think that by regulating or over-regulating pixels, we're going to see this huge ramifications in commerce, but I think the ripple effect is probably deeper than we realise.
Yeah, I think it is. It's very interesting, Nick, and I think it is very important to remember that digital advertising keeps services and content free for consumers. Very interesting point. We might move on to data clean rooms now, and Adele, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, feel free to make any general comments, but specifically whether you think that practices, processes, details about clean rooms and how they operate are currently too opaque.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think it's a critical issue in our industry right now. There are some clean rooms out there that still operate as a black box. And so I suppose brands and data owners don't really know where their data is going, how it's being handled, or even who has true visibility on it inside that black box. And I think that sort of almost, it undermines the purpose of a clean room, which is essentially meant to be a trusted, private, safe, secure environment for data collaboration to take place. So if I was to give advice to any brands in the room when they're considering clean room solutions, I think it's really important to understand that they're not all created equal, and that they, just because they're called a clean room doesn't mean they're all offering the same safe and secure, technology. So I guess it's about maybe asking yourselves questions around, am I expected to hand my data over to a third-party environment, therefore losing control, or do I retain that control and it remains within my tech stack, and in the case of a decentralized option? Is there differential privacy baked in to the tech that I'm using? And is it independent and agnostic and allowing me to securely connect to data partners to be able to really scale my campaigns and maximize the opportunity there of my first-party data? So I think, clean rooms, they should enable data owners and not really put any of their data at risk at any point.
Yeah, I think the extension to that, Adele, it's really good points, and I think the general principles of particularly how you guys have architected a platform, I think I share a lot of kind of ideologies around decentralization and how you make sure that the control remains there. I think the extension to not all data clean rooms are kind of created equal is there's not a single data clean room in the market which just automatically gives you compliance. And the extension to the paper that you had written recently, Peter, is even the treatment of personal information, and this applies to the pixels but extends into things in a clean room as well. If you feed data into a clean room that ultimately has it coming back out at an individual level, it will still be treated and should be treated as personal information. It doesn't matter what kind of protection you've done as you go through. It doesn't matter if you've got fancy encryption processes or anything through there. If you have individual identifiers that come out, it's going to still be treated as personal information. The ones that are architected in the right way and have the decentralized structures and have the right controls means there's pathways where you can make sure it doesn't come out if you don't have those right permissions. But the key thing here, even from what the privacy legislation will probably go towards, is it's important to still understand the difference with how you use these tools and technologies. And it's the same with everything that you've ever used before in your life. It's like encryption, right? It's like, oh, my data's protected because I encrypted it. But it's like, did you encrypt it? Did you encrypt it right? Did you encrypt it with a key that says 1, 2, 3 encryption and then you send that out to the internet? Like, it depends on how you use these technologies. And I think as we go forward, clean rooms are just a tool currently that's being used. And as we move towards more privacy legislations and just the next kind of wave of the internet, like who knows what like an agentic kind of clean room kind of concept even looks like at this point in time. But I think it's more the first principles of what are we actually doing to think about the data and treat the data, and ultimately going back to the customer and how we're protecting them and creating value for them as well.
Thanks, Danny. Peter, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how businesses can genuinely de-identify within a clean room.
Yeah, and really picking up on Danny's point, sometimes the issue is whether the data room is in reality clean or not. But more often the issue is the form of the outputs that are allowed out from that clean room, to whom they are provided, under what controls and protections, and to pick up Danny's point, whether they are in the form of individual inferences about an individual at the transactor level. And of course, the point from the privacy law viewpoint is that if I generate an inference about you, then the generation of that inference is personal information about you, regardless of whether it was derived from information about you or not. So my inference might be completely wrong. My inference might, in that sense, might be from synthetic data, but if it accretes to a file of a profile about a known individual, that is personal information about that individual and regulated. The other thing I wanted to say is that it sort of picks up on the conversation earlier today around potential for data model collapse and the problem of data in an AI world and the corruption, the loss of fidelity of data. I mean, I do think that fidelity of data will become more of an issue in this sector, like in every other sector, as we move into a synthetic data and AI-driven world. And I think that the regulatory regime needs to adjust to reflect and understand that as well, which is why I actually think this dual track concept is a really interesting track, because then potentially you ask the question not whether it is personal information or not, but whether that information is being used in the best interest of the person concerned or not, and whether you've got enough confidence in that view that you think it can withstand Carly Kind pulling you to pieces to see whether she agrees with your view or not. So I think it's a very interesting time for the industry.
I think one thing that's come out, and this is something that we were chatting about a couple of days ago, is that privacy and data management, it's no longer the role of the lawyers and a data officer. This now spans across every element of every business, and we were actually chatting, comparing it with, for example, financial management, where you might have your accountant, your auditor coming in each year and doing the technical work. But at some level, everyone in that organisation, whether it's managing your budget, whether it's reporting, whether it's presenting to the board, everyone has some level of financial literacy and can look at the business through that lens. And without wishing to put words in your mouth, I think we as a group were agreed that that is really the way that privacy is moving now. And with that observation in mind, Adele, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the role of agencies, media agencies, in navigating the privacy world.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think they're at the perfect intersection where they own the relationships between brands, publishers, platforms, retailers, who all have really, really valuable data. And so it's becoming more important for those agencies to understand how they can connect those data partners together in a really responsible way. As you know, earlier this year, WPP Media acquired InfoSum Technology, and we're beginning to now see firsthand how those agencies are able to connect those data partners together by using our tech and ensuring that there's absolutely zero movement of data, of their clients' data and any of the partners' data as well. So yeah, it's fantastic to see, and that's allowing them then to build personalised, performant, scalable campaigns with protection of that consumer privacy as well. So yeah, look, it'll be the agencies, I think, that manage to combine media with data, with privacy, all under one strategy that will really lead the way.
Thanks, Adele. Nick, any thoughts on that?
Maybe just a tiny build on Adele's point, because I completely agree. I think one thing that I've noticed especially with independent agencies, is those sort of grey areas that you lean into just out of scope that you might say are more the marketing team for your client, or you might traditionally say is the role of an analytics agency or someone else, but they don't have someone in the employ for, and you'll just jump in and you'll set tags up for them, or you'll do something to help them. I think there might be more defined adjacent services in media agencies that are specific to the management of the collection of that data on the client side. Not necessarily the CDP and the CRM and the warehousing side. I think that's probably still very much something the client wants to at least lead and have consultative sort of processes. But especially for SMEs, again, just sort of smaller businesses, I feel we're going to need to become experts rather than, oh no, I can just do it because I've done it before. So I think we're going to see that. I think at the same time, there's probably a role for agencies to, I think, do what was alluded to before and say when this is a risk for them, or this is outside of a service they should be providing, and they should be speaking to legal or people who are qualified in this management, because data management and privacy is now going to have its own P&L column. There's going to be costs to organisations in making sure that they get to the end and the deficit isn't too much. So don't fake that you can do something you can't do. I think that's the duality.
Yeah, I think what's going to be interesting there is actually around accountabilities, right? Like I like a lot that concept of the same as we think about financial accounting and auditing, same in this, not just privacy space, but data in general, really. We were in a cab on the way here today and we were talking about how AI models are starting to retrain off data which was generated by AI models, and we don't even know if that, was that a hallucination that it's now retraining off? So these kind of concepts of data auditability extend past the privacy domain into kind of other areas of quality. But I think the important thing starts becoming accountability. If agencies are going to take a bigger role in leaning in and saying, yeah, we're going to help you to say what we can do and this is what you're going to go through. It's the same as if Deloitte goes in and audits one of the large organisations and they say, yep, I'm going to put accountability to say your financial statements are in place. If something happens and those financial statements aren't, and it was an error by Deloitte, those guys hold liability. And I think it's an interesting space for the agencies to start to look at, or any service provider in that space, is if they're going to bleed the line into legal advice, then they're going to have to start wearing accountability as well. And I don't really think it's the right place to always say, oh no, client's always your responsibility. I'm just going to come in and say, here's my advice, but do your own legal work. So I think we're going to see some interesting conversations around accountability in this space as the roles get blurred.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little bit controversial. I think probably too many organisations represented in this room lean on the big four consultancies too much and don't push their lawyers and risk people hard enough. And my experience is that many things that people want to do in the digital marketing and advertising space are possible and legal with appropriate data governance, including, use of data clean rooms and privacy enhancing technologies, your lawyers will never understand it properly unless you educate them. That requires data literacy within the organisation to lift the boat of what the lawyers and the risk personnel are telling you, and often contradicting what they are telling you. And the Big Four consultants might do excellent work, but they are expensive and therefore episodic, and their use doesn't build your organisational DNA, your organisational data literacy. And for the reason I just said, unless you build that organisational DNA around data literacy, you will not be able to do data governance that enables you to do many of the things that you otherwise might do. So it kind of begins with data literacy, and you're not going to get that from your risk and compliance people. You're going to have to lift their capabilities, and beware of consultants, because you might be using them as a substitute to developing the DNA you need to develop.
I think that's a really good point, Peter. And, you know, in order to get an internal privacy framework accurate, number one, the most important point is to understand your business and how it works, the ad tech chain, whatever the detail you need is. And at the moment, and I know there are a few lawyers in the room, and, you know, thank you for coming, because I think that that is, you know, really where those sorts of external consultants need to be a lot more across the commercials and the technology that is being used, because privacy law does not operate. It never has operated in isolation, but as technology moves apace and becomes more and more complex, it is going to be impossible for external consultants, I think, to pretend or to add real value without that knowledge. Now, 11:14. In a spirit of being slightly competitive, the other panels have done a one takeaway point. Would love this panel to do the same for the audience. If we just start at Peter's end and move this way, that would be great.
Look, I'll be quick because I've had too much of this floor anyway. The past is not a guide to the future, and it's all up in the air, and this industry has a chance to tell the government what it should do, and why that won't impede productivity or might actually assist productivity. So we need to lean in and tell the government.
Thanks, Peter. Nick?
I would say if you're looking, it's a big thing to tackle if you're looking for somewhere to start. Bite-sized chunks, start with minimisation, look at what you're collecting that you don't need. Look at services that you either want to become an expert in, or you feel that maybe you want to consult out, but remove the stuff that you don't need first, and then work out how you're going to manage the stuff that you do need.
From my point of view, I think it's just about taking the time to really understand, from my world anyway, in a clean room environment, like understand what the differences are between all of the options out there. It takes some time to get under the hood of the privacy and the security enabled in each of those options, and yeah, just really do your homework before you make any decisions.
For me, a couple of years ago, the great Lorraine Donnelly from Yahoo actually did something awesome on... Yeah, shout out to Lorraine. She's not here. Actually, she's flying to France, which is making everyone else jealous. But she quoted MC Hammer and said, "Stop, collaborate and listen," which was an awesome way to get in people's minds. So taking inspiration from that, I actually went more the Michael Jackson route. I've got some like fresh white shoes on. I should have brought a glove. But I think the message is you are not alone. And I think this is a space where we're all kind of navigating this, and nobody has the answers, and individual organisations don't have the answers, but the purpose of bodies like IAB putting out guidance, or individual service providers. I can see Chris Brinkworth from Civic Data in the space. We've got Peter Len up on stage. There's a lot of people who are looking at this really hard, so you don't have to do it yourself. So yes, absolutely stay across what you need to know. You have to be educated yourself, but know that there's a lot of people who are looking at this space, and you're going to have a lot of help to navigate whatever future the privacy regulation throws at us.
Fantastic. Thanks, Danny. Now, JJ, I think we have, I'd like to thank the panel first of all. I think fantastic insights, thank you. JJ, have we got time for questions? If so, do you want to take the stage?
Do you have time for questions, Gay? Don't ask me, I always say yes. But to be honest, I think a lot of them have been answered.
Do people have for a couple of questions?
Yeah. Let's ask the floor. Can I steal your mic, Peter, please? Thank you. Do we have anyone here that has a... Oh, there we go, AB. I expect nothing else. It'll be a softball one, won't it?
Stay here, actually. Sarah and Nicholas both... Andrew Birmingham from MI3, so media. Sarah and Nicholas both pulled out the argument that consumers benefit from free products on the web. I want to challenge that idea. If the price, the marketing and advertising is baked into the price, is it really free? But more to the point, to Peter's point, if we're going to start optimising price based on somebody's data that you've hoovered up, doesn't that argument kind of fall over?
I'm not going to debate it first, Nick, but I'm going to just double down on you, Andrew. I think I completely agree with that as well, right? Like, we say that things are free on the web, but what is the value of really being free, right? I think that's where for years there's been an incredible amount of advertising revenue. I'm not going to point at the major tech platforms, but they've created massive profits off using people's data. And have individuals really benefited in the right way? I don't know. And I think this is one of those things around value where part of this kind of shift in the landscape makes us readdress what that value actually is. Like, is using someone's data actually not free? Is that remunerating them? Like, I think there's a whole lot of other models here that we need to start really interrogating pretty closely, because I think the assumptions we've had, and it's just a really easy fall away line to say, oh, it's free, we've got your data, that's the exchange. I just don't think that stacks up anymore.
I completely agree. I think where we missed the opportunity was better communicating to consumers as to what that cost was along the way. So it wasn't this whole, we've got your data and you can't whinge because you got a service out of it. It's more we have privacy banners that pop up that look identical and no one reads a privacy policy. So I think we should start doing, everyone, publishers, advertisers, is be really clear to consumers as to what the underlying cost is in that data exchange, so they are better informed. Great example, I would happily keep my personal data in the Maps ecosphere because I don't want to pay a couple $100 for the service, but I'd happily take my data out of Meta as an example. But no, I completely agree, it is definitely not free.
I mean, I think it's about fair value exchange, and the example I like to use is Vitality UK, who are a health insurer in the UK. And Vitality, I think they still have it, they certainly had a program where they would give you an Apple smartwatch, and the deal was that if you wore the Apple smartwatch for a certain number of months and allowed your data to be shared and used for them in their insurance pricing, they would guarantee that they would never charge you more than the rack rate for insurance, and that they might give you a benefit based upon that data. So floor plus benefit. Now, you can argue whether that's a fair exchange, but it's the kind of more sophisticated view of what a fair value for data might look like and how it might be set than the arguments we have about free and open internet.
Can I be really quick and give you a really creepy specific version of that happened to me? So it was a very long time ago, maybe 20 years ago, and I was working in retail and I had taken a cigarette break. I have not smoked in over a decade, but I was at the time. And someone approached me in a immaculately dressed and said, "Would you like free cigarettes for a year?" And I was like, well, absolutely. And they're like, well, all we need you to do is just fill out, each time we'll give you a pack of cigarettes and you fill out a form and you just say what you thought about them. Did you enjoy them? What was good? What wasn't? It's going to be nice and easy for each pack of cigarettes that you smoke. And I asked if I could think about it, and she said, that's fine, I'll be in this spot tomorrow. This is where you all congregate. And the next day I came back and I said, look, no, not quite. The next day when I came back on my break, I said, look, I've had a bit of a think about it and I can reconcile the damage I'm doing to myself, but I don't want that information being used to impact others. So it's a very extreme example. But yeah, I could quantify the cost of that, and that wasn't worth it.
Thank you very much.